So what does the research show? What are some of the trends in database adoption and analytics tools that have been spawned by the pandemic? And how are businesses both making efficient use of their existing platforms and tools and determining where to invest next? For answers to those questions, we turn to our next guest, who is a research director with 451 Research, Matt Aslett.
Thank you, everybody, for joining this session, and thanks to Yellow Brick for inviting us to be part of this event. My name's Matt Aslett. I'm Research Director for Data, AI, and Analytics at 451 Research, which is now a part of S&P Global Market Intelligence. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to be with you as part of this event. Of course, unfortunately, we can't do that in person. And perhaps to kick things off here, I thought we could look at some survey data. Actually, we've done a few surveys recently asking people about the implications of COVID and how that's affecting their business. And slightly bad news in a way is that this virtual events is the new normal. Certainly, we don't expect to return anytime soon to physical events. We actually see that a third of organizations expect work travel in Q4 to be actually reduced by up to 80% or more in comparison to the previous year. And actually, almost half of enterprises expect travel limitations or bans that have been implemented due to the outbreak to remain in place in the long term. So this is very much the new normal, but obviously we're trying to make the most of it with great events such as this. And there is some other slightly good news we see from our surveys is that actually fewer organizations than expected say they face a major disruption. I don't want to downplay obviously the impact. There are a lot of organizations that are significantly challenged, but we do see we ran surveys in March and then again in June, and we've got another one coming up. But from March to June, we saw actually quite a significant change in that in March, nearly 50% of organizations said they would probably struggle to function beyond 6 months without some kind of major disruption because of coronavirus related issues. Now we see that actually nearly 2/3 of organizations feel they can function for that six months and keep going beyond that. So there's still a lot of challenges that organizations face, but it is quite good news that we see that perhaps less companies feel they are significantly in trouble compared to just a few months ago. The other thing we see, obviously related to coronavirus, is a lot of organizations changing their priorities and changing the initiatives that they have. And there's a lot of numbers on this chart, but so I'll just pick out a few key pieces of information here. We look at overall digital transformation initiatives. We actually see that 25% of organizations tell us they've accelerated or newly introduced digital transformation initiatives specifically because of coronavirus. Look at migration of workloads to the cloud. Again, 22% of organizations accelerating or newly introducing projects. And then data analytics as well, a slightly smaller number, 12% say they're accelerating or newly introducing projects. But it does show that there is a proportion, at least, of organizations that are changing their priorities, driving forward with new initiatives. Of course, on the flip side, at the other end, there are a lot of companies that are actually delaying or canceling projects as well. I think also what we have to notice is clearly those two things can be happening at the same time. And we see some evidence of this actually from our AI and machine learning survey, from our Voice of the Enterprise AI and machine learning product. And this data point I thought was really, really interesting. So nearly 60% of organizations in this survey told us that specifically due to coronavirus, they're decelerating or halting AI initiatives. At the same time, in the same survey, 3/4 of respondents told us that they're actually investing in new AI initiatives. So, what's going on here? At first glance, these look like they're contradictory, but of course, what we see is that a lot of the existing projects were reliant on existing data, existing models. The word unprecedented is thrown around a lot, in relation to coronavirus, but the changes have truly been unprecedented, and a lot of the existing data and existing models, just isn't fit for purpose. If you're a retailer and you're trying to figure out, once you, as you opened up your stores again, how are people going to respond? How are your customers going to respond? Are they going to come, back into the stores or not? there was just no data on which to base judgments on. And so obviously we see organizations investing in new projects, new initiatives as new data becomes available to them. And we do think that data and analytics and AI and machine learning in particular have a key role to play in relation to organizations, not just surviving this current situation, but potentially thriving. And again, from our surveys, we see some really great evidence of that. For the last 2 years running on this slide, or I think it's actually 3 or maybe even 4 years running, data analytics tools and platforms have been rated as the #1 technology game changer by respondents to our Digital Pulse survey. As you can see, with machine learning and AI, they're at #2. And actually, in the last year, they actually gained ground over some of the other key technologies, even though we see a lot of emerging technologies in there, things like blockchain and container management, a lot of buzz around these new technologies and their potential to really change the game. It's still data and analytics and AI machine learning that is the #1 and 2 respectively. And if you think about what organizations are trying to do in relation to COVID-19, then you really see why data and analytics is so important. You look at companies, they're trying to do things like improve their efficiency and cost cutting. They're trying to understand and evolve their business processes, and they're trying to, as we said, a significant proportion of them are trying to accelerate or start new digital transformation projects, all of which rely on data and analytics. So data and analytics absolutely has a fundamental role to play in organizations, as I say, not just surviving this situation, but actually thriving and potentially coming out the other side in a better position. A lot of that, is due to what we see as the greater recognition of the importance of data. Data obviously has always been important. It's always had a key role to play in senior decision making. But what we've seen, particularly I've seen this actually, more anecdotally in conversations I've had with end users during the pandemic, is an increased understanding with senior decision makers of the role of data and analytics in creating their plans to come out the other side. And so this was from a survey that was conducted right at the start of the pandemic. So it's an ongoing process, but we've definitely seen an increased proportion of organizations that recognize the importance of data and see that data will be increasingly important to them over the next 12 months. So 82% of respondents see that today, and especially what we've seen, this number has been creeping up in the surveys we've done, but what we've seen is the proportion of those that say it will be significantly more important has jumped up, and as you see, it was nearly 43% of those in the last survey. So there is a greater recognition already, and I think what we see from conversations we've been having is that the pandemic has accelerated that, particularly among senior decision makers. Another of the key trends, obviously, that we see shaping, the market over the last few years has been cloud adoption. And, we've seen, again, it's been going on for many, many years, but we've seen over time an increased maturity of organizations in the way in which they're engaging with cloud, to the extent that, today we see that actually the highest proportion of respondents to our surveys are actually in the cloud maturity stage. There's a broad implementation of product applications and cloud services across the organization. And so, you put these two things together, and no surprise, you see increasingly organizations are moving their data and analytics and BI workloads away from traditional on-premises resources and towards cloud and SaaS and private cloud environments. And this is really highlighted when you ask, what's the primary environment? And of course, in years past, the primary environment has overwhelmingly been that traditional server infrastructure. And as you can see, there's going to be a significant drop, at least that's what our survey respondents tell us, in terms of the primary environment. Of course, not all data analytics workloads run on the same environment. There are multiple environments across lots of organizations. So if we ask about, not just which is the primary environment, but which services a company is using for a different, multitude of applications and workloads, the picture is a bit different. Clearly, we still see on-premises non-cloud declining, but we see, look here in the orange on this slide, that's where companies expect their data processing workloads to be 2 years from now. And look at that, almost an even split there between on-premises non-cloud, on-premises private cloud, hosted private cloud, software as a service, and infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service, not too far behind. And so, the key thing is here, workloads are moving away from on-premises traditional server infrastructure, but they're moving in multiple directions. And this is a challenge that we see a lot of organizations are facing, is trying to figure out, well, which workloads should move where, and more to the point, how do you manage these workloads across different locations? And of course, what we see is, the future for most organizations is hybrid. Hybrid cloud, in some ways, for some time was almost something that companies stumbled into by accident due to different departments or shadow OT spinning up different resources in different clouds. What we see is increasingly organizations are deliberately doing hybrid IT and making use of multiple clouds, including obviously their on-premises data centers, as a strategic choice. And in fact, 42% of organizations tell us they already have a hybrid architecture in place, and an additional 15% are in the process of implementing, and another 15% are planning to implement hybrid. So the future for most organizations is hybrid. And that obviously has some significant implications when it comes to data processing and data warehousing workloads in particular. And in one of our recent surveys, specifically looking at data analytics workloads, we asked about both what's happening with the existing workloads and what's happening with the new workloads. And we see some really interesting things. So, there's whilst a lot of the general movement is towards cloud, there is a significant proportion, 25% of those workloads, that are being modernized in place. And you can see some of the reasons for doing that: security, locality, sovereignty, and of course, making use of existing investments. Companies have made investments in on-premises infrastructure. Clearly, they want to make the most of that investment while they can. And even with new workloads, although a significant proportion of new workloads are obviously being deployed in the cloud, we still see, there is, 13% is still being, companies expect those workloads to be deployed on traditional physical server infrastructure, and 20% are expecting those workloads to be deployed on-premises cloud, even if they're designing for a cloud-native architecture. So you've got about a third of new workloads are still being deployed on premises. So again, really highlights the fact that the future is for most organizations is hybrid. And even though a lot of workloads are either moving to the cloud or being deployed directly to the cloud, organizations need to plan for and be mindful of the reasons why they would be potentially deploying workloads on premises. And as we said, so security, locality have a role to play in that. Also, performance and latency clearly are key factors that companies will be thinking about. Of course, what that does mean, and we see this increasingly, is that companies are very much cognizant of, when they're looking at their database providers, is that provider capable of delivering a product that can run on multiple cloud environments, including on-premises data center infrastructure, and are they capable of supporting multiple environments? And no surprise that we see that 85% of organizations tell us that database support for hybrid cloud deployment is important to them, and is something that they are evaluating when they're looking at new new database and data warehouse providers. So that was sort of a rapid run through, obviously, of some of the key trends we see and the environment as it's shaping out here. We've been involved with a number of conversations with our clients around what they should be thinking about with their data and analytics strategies and projects amid COVID-19. And there's a couple of key sort of takeaways that we would recommend to them. I mean, the first is that analytics should absolutely remain an enterprise priority. I think even if companies that are really, really challenged and are cutting back on non-essential spending, they still need to process data and analyze how they can best survive this situation. We do see that it is a data-driven economy, and it remains a data-driven economy, and it's those companies that make the best use of analytics and drive transformation efforts that stand the best chance of outlasting this current situation. Don't let perfection become the enemy of the good, which sounds perhaps a little strange, but what we've seen is, as we talked about, the existing data, existing models, perhaps are not fit for purpose. Companies are having to rethink both their existing analytics projects and their models, and do some scenario planning. It's impossible to predict how things are going to evolve from here, and so be a bit more pragmatic, be a bit more agile, focus on scenario analysis and planning, and prepare to make rapid decisions as the situation evolves, and we get a little bit more clarity about the shape the world is taking. And therefore, you need to ensure that your data and analytics projects and plans are aligned with central transformation initiatives, and and allow the organization to move quickly and pragmatically when it makes sense to do so. And thirdly, of course, whilst there's a lot of focus on what's happening right now, we see that many organizations that are being successful right now, they are remaining focused still on their long-term goals. Yes, there is an opportunity clearly to rethink previous assumptions and it potentially accelerate transformation plans, but fundamental trends such as the need to address hybrid data processing requirements and the need for good data governance, for example, and security and privacy, etc., remain just as important as ever. And indeed, as we've seen, companies are accelerating perhaps their move to the cloud right now. This issue of hybrid data processing, the ability to manage data across multiple environments is actually arguably more important than ever. So with that, I'll thank you very much for your time. I have to briefly display the slide, but I'll finish with thanking you again for attending this session. Thanks again to Yellowbrick for having us as part of this event. There's my contact details there. Of course, if you want to follow up on anything I said, you want to find out more details about anything, please do get in contact and let us know. But with that, again, I'll thank you for your time.
Welcome to Yellowbrick, the only modern data warehouse for hybrid cloud. 100 times faster performance, thousands of concurrent users, and petabytes of data. Get faster, richer, more accurate insights, all while saving millions in costs. Yellowbrick gives you the power to make the right decisions, the ones that vault your business ahead of the competition, now and in the future. Schedule a demo at yellowbrick.com.